Hello and welcome to the Delta Source Podcast, your number one source for Magna Guard security systems, which work great when they're turned on. This is Mr.
That's
Legitimacy with Good
right.
Call Paul,
We're coming
and
at you.
we're talking about Lair of Grievous, Episode 10 of Season 1 of the Clone Wars. We're going to talk about how the quote at the beginning of the episode relates to the episode itself. Woo. Okay, so let's take a look at that quote. This one is, "Most powerful is he who controls his own power." And let's read an episode description here. General Grievous must prove himself worthy of the Separatists when Count Dooku leads Jedi Master Kit Fisto and his former Padawan, the Mon Calamari Jedi Nadar Veb, to Grievous's villainous enclave.
Or
Nice.
Nadarveb.
Yeah.
Uh,
So, of course, spoilers for this episode. What are your thoughts here, Good Call Paul, on how this quote relates to the episode?
I would say that you definitely could make it work. I would say, for example, that Grievous. The first comparison would be like Grievous and Nadar Veb. Veb is a Jedi. He's an apprentice, but he has the power to fight with a lightsaber and to use the Force. He does pretty well until he runs into Grievous. And then he gets killed because he loses control of his emotions and goes off to get revenge, and that leads to Grievous isolating him and killing him. He's
Right.
a powerful Jedi compared to you or I, compared to anyone in the galaxy, he's pretty powerful.
Yeah.
But compared to General Grievous, he is not, and he doesn't have a realistic idea of his abilities to fight. So he ends up paying for it.
Yeah, definitely. I definitely identified Nadar as the person who does not control the power and gets, suffers consequences for it. And on the other side of that, I definitely see Kit Fisto as the one who does control their power and therefore is effectively more powerful.
Right.
Throughout the episode, he doesn't go for like the forced entry when they're at the door. One of his quotes is, "Those who have power should restrain themselves from using it." And when he's fighting against Grievous, he hides in the mist instead of, going head to head for the full amount of time he needs to stall out there. So he's definitely picking and choosing when and where to use strength and power and force. And at the end of the day, he's the only one who survives this on the Jedi Republic side. So he does kind of end up, coming out at the end. I think I'm just saying the same thing again.
Well, yeah, no, I think we both are completely in agreement that the episode's quote does apply to both the Jedi. I would say you could also possibly apply it to Grievous.
Yeah.
Because he has a very good idea of what he can and can't win against in a lightsaber fight, and he does a pretty good job of isolating and using his advantages to pick them off one by one, rather than
Right.
trying to fight everybody at the same time, and that probably would result in him being defeated.
Right. Yeah, that's a good point. And the only other, so I didn't have a lot of strong thoughts about Grievous. So I like what you just said. The only thing I could think of was that, after he realizes his Magna Guards were deactivated by Dooku, he turns them back on because I guess, the Magna Guards being an asset at his disposal are kind of part of his power, and so he's trying to control them again by turning them on and using them against the Jedi, but that was as far as I got. It wasn't a very strong developed thought. And similarly with Dooku, I was thinking as part of the Separatist forces, Grievous as an asset constitutes part of Dooku's power, and he's trying to control that power by testing him. but that was the only thought I had for Dooku as well. Still there, good call, Paul?
Yes, I'm still here.
Okay.
Yes. Dooku testing Grievous. I'm sorry, I was just processing that statement.
Yeah.
Yeah. Hmm. You could see that too, I suppose. He does say he's testing him.
Mhm.
I don't know. Grievous's characterization in the show is kind of back and forth because, or I should say, Grievous's characterization in all of the EU is kind of back and forth because in the show he spends a lot of time like running away and losing.
Yeah.
But in this episode he actually does pretty well for himself. I see why Dooku would want to test him, I suppose.
Hmm.
Uh,
Oh, you know what I just remembered? There's also whenever Grievous is starting to be worked on by the maintenance droid, he says like the maintenance droid says, "I don't know why you ever submitted to these enhancements," and Grievous says something like, "I did not submit to anything. I chose these."
interesting.
So
That's interesting because it's not really true according to his backstory. I mean, it kind of is, but it kind of isn't.
yeah, well, at least in
Um,
his mind, he thinks it's true.
there's
Um, and
there's
that's sort
actually
of
a
enhancing
go ahead.
his power and trying to control his power by, enhancing his body or replacing his body, as it were.
Mhm. There was actually a bit of a controversy about that at the time.
Okay.
One of the first continuity controversies that we saw, the first one was probably, oh man, Anakin has an apprentice. But this show was still kind of sort of trying to fit into Legends. It doesn't fit that well, but
Right.
and so there was people complaining that Grievous's backstory is that he was shot down in the shuttle and then put back together. He was a warrior and he got badly hurt and then had to get reassembled basically by the Separatists. Uh,
Mhm.
and it wasn't by his choice. In fact, it's implied that Dooku sabotaged his shuttle because he wanted a general,
Mm.
so that he deliberately crippled Grievous and then rebuilt him. But in this version of the story, Grievous is saying, "No, I did it." And there were people who were like, "Wait a minute, that's contradictory." The man, Dave Filoni himself, who directed the show, said, "Well, unreliable narrator. Maybe Grievous just believes that he chose it, or maybe he's convinced himself that he believes that he chose it
Yeah.
because he would rather think that than accept the fact that he was screwed over and shot down and almost killed."
Especially if he also conceives of himself as, the mighty Kalish warrior that is deserving of multiple statues honoring himself inside of his lair.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, he
Okay.
definitely does have a bit of an ego problem. That's for sure.
um. Yeah. So I'm glad you brought that up because one of my questions was going to be how much on Legends, how much information on Grievous's past life is there in Legends. So that is all good stuff to know.
There was a comic series about it, and pretty much just that. But yeah, we did at least get the fact that he was fighting a war and he got shot down and almost died in a shuttle crash.
Okay. So I have another line of thought about Nadar Veb.
Okay.
Um, so, Nadar seems to be one of those generations of Padawan that was promoted to knight at the start of the war because Kit Fisto says, I was never able to finish your training.
Mm-hmm.
And he also typifies something that Yoda says to Obi-Wan in Attack of the Clones when Obi-Wan about Anakin, he's saying his abilities have made him arrogant. And Yoda is like, yes, yes, a flaw more common among Jedi. Too sure of themselves they are, even the older, more experienced ones. And that was even before the start of the war. And then, you take a bunch of, not even fully trained Jedi that are suffering this symptom, and you promote them to knight and make them generals. That's a formula for how you get people like Nadar Veb.
That is true. Overconfident and undertrained,
Yeah.
and then they end up getting killed, which happened a lot. Also, what business? And on top of that, the fact that Jedi are all automatically promoted to the rank of either commander or general, even though they really have no idea of how to lead soldiers. I mean, I don't think that small unit tactics was really covered by the Jedi Temple, in the years leading up to this.
Yeah,
Uh,
probably not so much.
so there's also that. It's definitely a situation where, but I think that was the point. I think that people who complain that the Jedi are kind of a bunch of weirdos who have this like creepy, emotionless quasi religion and who go off and fight this huge war that even though they talk about peace and all that is like, and that's a flaw of the prequels. I think it's not a flaw. I think it's the point.
Yeah, I
They're
agree.
being pushed into an area that's out of their comfort zone because they've gotten complacent over the last 1,000 years of peace.
Mm.
And now Palpatine's manipulating them into a place where they can't possibly win because he can't defeat them conventionally. He's just him, but he certainly can defeat them by getting them all out of position and then having a bunch of clone troopers shoot them in the back.
Yep.
So it is. They shouldn't be doing it. No, and yes, they have taken their dogma too far. That's the point. They do come off
Yeah.
as kind of creepy and unsettling to the normal citizen of the galaxy, which is part of the reason why when they do get wiped out, the galaxy is like, I mean,
Yeah.
they were kind of weird. I don't know.
Time to forget about those guys so that nobody knows who they are in 20 years.
Jedi, never heard of them. What's a Jedi? It's a big galaxy. I'm sure there's plenty of people who never even saw one.
Yeah. So, do you have any final thoughts about this episode?
Not about this episode specifically, but I am realizing now that I'm super glad that George Lucas didn't have like young Han Solo show up and meet like Yoda or something in the
Oh,
prequels.
yeah.
Because he could have done that, and that would have made Han being like, "I don't believe in the Jedi, kid," to be like even dumber.
Right.
Because people are already like, "How do you not? They were everywhere. They led this huge war 20 years ago. You were like 10 when this happened." But also, if he literally had like shook hands with Yoda at some point on the Tantive 4 and just been like, "Hey there, Master Yoda. My name's Han. Han what? Who are your people? I don't have any people. Solo, you shall be called."
Stop. You're making it better than the Solo movie already. That's mean. That movie has some redeeming qualities. I don't hate it.
It's honestly not
Anyway.
bad. It's a solid like 6.5 out of 10.
Yeah.
Like it's fine. Not as good as Rogue One, but like the second best movie that Disney has made for sure. Maybe depends on what you think of Episode 7, I guess.
Right.
But,
So, my final thought about the episode before we close out is just that this episode stars two of my favorite voice actors, with Phil Lamar as Kit Fisto and Tom Kenny as Nadar Veb. So you have
Also
Samurai Jack and SpongeBob leading this episode together, and
Yeah,
that's just
oh, man.
fantastic.
what an absolute delight.
Yeah. So, this has been Delta Source, your number one source for undertrained army generals for the Grand Army of the Republic. And until next time, may the Force be with you.